Participants are to be kept, I mean, they are to be in mute, sir. Then it will be rectified.
Participants?
No, all participants, they should be in mute position. Then it will be rectified because the few people who are opening, sir, to speak. That's why it's resounding.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
please follow. Please mute yourselves. Still it is disabled, you know. Still it is disabled. Something is wrong with this.
Is it on a speaker mode or a headphone mode, sir?
Headphone?
హెడ్ఫోన్ మోడ్ లో ఉందా స్పీకర్ మోడ్ లో ఉందా సార్ అది కూడా ఒక్కసారి చెక్ చేసుకో
Speaker phone different kadamma. Asli actually today only difficulty. But host there is some he has to, you know, permit me or to he has to allow me kada.
యా
For screen sharing it is something different, no? Sir, come in one.
నాకు తీసేసి ఆల్రెడీ host disabled participant screen sharing and ఏమొచ్చింది? Why is he doing this?
నవ్ ఇట్స్ నాట్ కమింగ్
Now it's okay, sir.
నవ్ ఇట్ ఈస్ ఓకే ఇప్పుడు బాగానే వస్తుంది
ఏమొచ్చింది? You can see I'm not able to know this PPT not able to screen it.
సార్ మిమ్మల్ని co-host చేయమని చెప్పండి సార్ host ని.
Already I'm a co-host. Every day I'm doing it. Today only what's the problem?
So you're not a co-host as of now.
I don't know. Actually, from my side, I think it will go. In the
Sir,
last
it's
class also I did it. In the last class also I did it. Today only I'm not able to get it.
We are university is a host, sir. They
I
need to
know,
give you
I
the
know, but
permission.
host, he has to allow me, isn't it?
He have to give you.
He has to allow me.
Yes, sir.
Last class, okay, it was okay. Why is it today like this? Anyway, without PPT also, we can continue. Okay, no?
Yes, sir.
Shall I continue the class without PPTs? Whatever that I am doing, I am sorry, I am not able to screen it. It's not my fault also. It is part from the host side.
Okay, sir. Continue. No problem.
Host to disabled participant screen sharing. This is the message that I am getting, no? From my side, there is no fault at all. Already the PPT is opened. I just want to share it, but the host is not permitting me. Okay, okay, it's all right, my dear friends. Let us move into the continuation, not the continuation, but it's altogether a different unit, unit number 16, which is also connected with the sampling. Am I clear? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Please respond. Okay, unit number 16. It is on sample size and sampling errors. Sample size and sampling errors, that is unit number 16 that we're going to discuss. You have the study material with you now? Hello, sir. Hello.
some have and
Okay,
some
sir,
don't
okay.
I think so
I'm going to discuss unit number 16 that is connected with sample size and sampling errors.
okay
Okay?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, well, friends, all these days we have been talking, whenever we talk about the sample, we have also been talking about the sampling errors. It's not now, we have been talking this kind of, issue whenever we talk about the sampling that we have to select for our study.
sir
So,
can you repeat which unit you're discussing sir I'm sorry
well, friends, yeah, sampling errors. Sampling, we know pretty well what is sampling. It's a part or the portion of the population. So limited number of cases from a population is sampled. And there is a sample that are unrepresentative of the large sample. Unsatisfactory sampling plans can result in samples that are unrepresentative of the larger population at times. If that population doesn't represent, if that sample doesn't represent the population, there you are going to get the error. So since the sample is the portion of the population or the universe, whatever the features that this population contains or has, same features are to be seen in the sample. Okay? The same feature that what you find in the sample, then there would not be, that should also be represented, there would not be error. Error occurs when these features of the population are not replicated in the sample. Then you find the errors. You find the errors when the sample is not representative, when the sample is not...
Sir, now we can share screen, sir. You are the co-host now.
Yes, now. You are right. You are right.
Oh.
Okay now?
Yes.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Now I can see this sample size.
Kindly change the slide.
Okay. Yeah. So welcome you all again. Once again, welcome to this topic on sample size and sampling errors. This is unit number 16.
Yeah.
Well, friends, we have been talking about the introduction related to this particular.
Sir, can you share that PPT?
Well, friends, so sample is a portion of the population and it should be representative. When all the features of the population are contained in the sample, there should not be errors. When all the features of the population are not contained in the sample, there comes the question of error. So the higher the sampling error, the poorer the statistical inference. The higher the sampling error, the poorer the statistical inference. So you are not going to infer out of all the statistical techniques that you are going to use for analysis purpose. If there is error, in the sampling, then it will be very difficult for you to infer. That result cannot be interpreted properly. The result of the test cannot be interpreted properly if there is error in the sample. So the sample should be representative and it should contain all the features or the properties that are contained in the population. Then whatever that we talked about the statistical issues which are connected to the population, we can call them as parameters. No? The statistical features or the whatever that we calculate with regard to the population, it may be mean, median, mode, standard deviation, average deviation, quarter deviation, etc., etc. So we can call them as parameters. We have discussed this in the last class also. If you collect the mean of the population, that is the parameter of the population. If you calculate the mean of the sample, that is statistic. So this is the difference that what we discussed in the last class also. Parameters are related to the population, whereas static is related to sampling. So if the mean of the sample is calculated, we can call it as a static. If the mean of the population is calculated, that is parameter. The difference between if the population mean and the statistical mean, if they are almost equal, then there would not be sampling error. I think there would not be much error if the value of the population mean and the sample mean, if they are okay, similar, almost equal, if the result or the yield is almost equal, then there would not be error. That means population mean and this sampling mean should go together. That should be one and the same. If they are one and the same, if there is no difference between the population mean and the statistic mean, sample mean, then you can call it as it's a sample error-free data. Sample error-free data when there is no difference between the population mean and the statistical mean. Okay. The higher the sampling error, then when there is too much error with regard to the sample that we choose, there lies the inference would be very, very difficult. To what the result is to be attributed, that would be very, very difficult if there is sampling error. The amount of fluctuations depend on the variability of the population and the sample. So therefore, if the population varies, similarly, the sample doesn't vary properly. If it doesn't consider all the units of the population, there I think variability of the population will also reflect in the sampling error. So one of the reasons for sampling error is when there is too much variability in the population and that is not considered by the researcher for choosing the population would also result in sampling error. The means can vary of the sample above average mean and below average mean scores. So the means can vary of the sample above average mean. Say, for example, if a test is conducted for the students, test in mathematics or any subject, and most of the people will be 90s, and some of the students will be below 50s. If you can calculate the mean for the scores of the below 50 and also above 50, then you find there's a difference between the means of below 50 and above 50 score candidates. There also lies the sampling error because there is a too much variation. When there is too much variation in the scores, then there we are going to find the sampling error. That is fluctuations. When the data has the fluctuations, then automatically there would also be sampling error. Then whenever we talk about the sampling error, there is a need to understand the descriptive statistics. Descriptive statistics, just now I have also mentioned that mean, median, mode, average deviation, quartile deviation, standard deviation, range, then skewness, kurtosis. These are all the descriptive statistics of the data. You have to describe how well the data is appropriate or proper. If the data is proper, then your mean, median, mode, all the values of these things, mean, median, mode, should place at a single point. When the mean, median, mode values are almost equal, then your data is normal. Data means the information that you gathered from the participants is normal. We can call it as normal distribution. So normal distribution, one of the characteristics of normal distribution is that your mean, median, and mode, the values of these things should be almost equal. If the mean is 55, the median should also be almost 55. Similarly, the mode, if these values are one and the same, then your distribution, sample distribution is normal. And if you can draw a graph for that scores, then you get this graph would be like that of a bell the shape of the graph would be bell shape. If the normal distribution satisfies, if the distribution satisfies the normal probability curve, that means your mean, median, mode. If these values are almost equal, then that is normal probability. That means satisfying the normal probability curve. So if you can draw for your scores, if you get the shape of a bell, we can call it as normal probability curve. Normal probability curve. The bell shape, you can recall the bell, the shape of the bell. How should it be, isn't it? From the bottom, then go up, then come down, then towards x-axis. It falls, but it will not touch the x-axis. One of the characteristics of normal probability curve is it should not touch the x-axis. That means if there are any zero scores, if a test is conducted for the students, achievement test, if anybody is getting zero, then that means something is not something is completely there is a wrong. Whenever there is a zero, then automatically, if you draw diagram or graph, that will touch the x-axis, which is not the characteristics of normal probability curve. That's the normal data. That is not the normal data. If it touches the x-axis, that is not the normal data. So therefore, if it is to be a normal distribution, then what? The shape of that graph should be bell-shaped one. Then only you have to apply all these statistical techniques. When the data is normal, then you have to use the statistical techniques. Okay, na? Even for if the data is not that much correct or proper, then we can also use some other statistical techniques. If the data is not able to satisfy the normal probability features, then we have used some other techniques with which we can analyze the data. But all the time, what we need is your data should satisfy the normal distribution. So therefore, if the standard deviation of, that means deviation of the scores from the mean, if it is dispersed
ये तो
too much from
आंकड़ा
the
क्या
mean,
ठीक है क्या?
if the scores are distributed from mean, if the variation is too much, then there would be something wrong. So the value of the standard deviation should not be deviated. The score should not be deviated too much from the mean. So the scores should not deviate too much from the mean. If they deviate means, then automatically the value of the standard deviation will result that it is not proper. The data is not proper. The sampling error would occur if the mean is less or above the population at times. So if the population mean is 100, normally your sampling mean should also be 100. Then there is no difference between the population mean and the sampling mean. So when there is no difference between the population mean and the sample mean, and the question of sampling error doesn't arise. Sampling error, most of the cases, you are going to get this sampling error because this is not that much easy to collect that kind of sample from the field, because there are certain things which we cannot consider for various reasons. Appropriately perfect kind of data you may not be getting, but there should be some kind of error in the sample that will also sampling error. So therefore, there would be difference between the population mean and the sample mean that indicates there is error. Then sampling distribution. We are talking about the sampling distribution. A sampling distribution refers to a probability distribution of statistical comes from choosing random samples of a given population. So random samples of a given population. So if the data is collected 5 or 6 times from the population. Then you can calculate for each data. For each data, you can calculate the mean for each time. If there is no difference with regard to the mean values with the other, then that is okay. If you find difference from one mean to another, that means one time you got some kind of 55 from the same sample. If you can collect next time the data, then that may also differ from the first one. So if there is any variation in the sample distributions, we can call it as the distribution at times, especially sampling, will also vary. The mean of the sampling distribution of the mean is mean from the population from which the scores were sampled. Therefore, the population has a mean, then the mean of the sample distribution should also be equal. So if there is 95 is the value of the mean value of the population, and if you get the same value for the sample, then there would not be any difference. But for every sampling, if there is variation, we can call it as sampling distribution of means. Because for every sampling, then you are getting different kinds of values with regard to means. So that we can call it as sampling distribution varies. But all the time, from all the cases, that means if the data is collected 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times, the mean value is supposed to be the same. But for every instance, it may differ. So therefore, that kind of thing is known as sampling distribution. Technically speaking, we can call it as sampling distribution of means, because here the mean is distributing. So sampling distribution of means, because the means are varying for every case or every instance. So that is known as sampling distribution of means. That means means vary from one instance to another instance. If the data is collected and the means are calculated, and all the times the mean is not the same, it may be different. So in that case, technically we can call it as sampling distribution of means. If it is very good data, which satisfies all these standards, then it's a question of error doesn't arise. All the means, if it is 5 times or 6 times, the data is collected and the means are calculated, and all these means are supposed to be the equal values, then there is no question, there is no problem at all for us. But the problem arises when all the means are different from one instance to another instance. If you find any difference, then that should be considered as sampling error. Then sampling size and sampling error. So we are talking about sampling size and sampling error. The rule is size of sample should be determined keeping in view the different factors, the following factors. So whenever you choose the sample and how much should be the sample, that question has to be answered. Because whether that is representative sample or not, that you have to decide. Say, if example, if there are 1,000 population, if we collect the data from 20 or 30 participants, that 20 or 30 participants may not represent that 1,000 population. Because the lesser the sample, the higher the error. The lesser the sample, the higher the error. That's the reason why if the sample size is not too much, not too less, that's what this statistic says. You have to decide in such a fashion that the sample should not be too much, it should not be too much, or it should not be that much higher, and it should not be lesser. Either it should be it should be or more or less mediocre, not a large, not a lesser. So therefore, the higher the sample size, the lesser the sampling error. So if you want to have this sampling size, then some of the factors that you have to bear in mind are: number one, nature of the universe. Universe is population. Whether it is heterogeneous needs large sample for sampling error. Heterogeneous needs, most of the cases you find, especially in India, the population is a heterogeneous one. There are many sections, fragmentation, segmentation, classification. On different variables you find, our population is a heterogeneous population. So if you can take up that kind of population from this heterogeneous group, if you can consider the sample from this heterogeneous population, then the sample would be very high also. If you do not collect the data from each and every segment equally well, then there should be some error. You have to consider our population is heterogeneous, and all the sections of this heterogeneous population need to be considered while selecting the population. That is one of the points that you have to bear in mind while collecting the data. Isn't it? You have many cases, and it's a question of SES. So circumstances of people will also differ. All are not sailing in the same boat. Their income levels are different. Some of them literates, and some of them non-literates, and different occupations. Isn't it? Poor, rich. Then, of course, there are various factors that you can find in our population. Huh? So that is heterogeneous population. From that heterogeneous population, and one should be very careful if you want to take up this representative sample, that sample should represent all the categories of that population. Otherwise, the error would be very high. The next point you have to bear in mind while taking the sampling is nature of the classes proposed. How many classes of this population you are going to cover? Large number is required for covering all the classes. So if there are many classes or the classification categories, if there are many categories in the population, there you are supposed to have a large number is required for covering all the classes. If there are many classes, categories, sections, segments, then parts, different parts, then you are supposed to have large number of sample, which will also represent all these segments. That is another point one has to keep in mind while talking about the sampling size. Next one is nature of study. For intensive study, small sample is enough. So if you want to have intensive depth, in-depth study, very, very in-depth study, very comprehensive, need to study each and every minute things of a particular issue, there you are supposed to have small sample. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for you to cover all those things. That's the reason why if you want to take up any intensive study, if that is intensive study, small sample is enough. Very critical, very comprehensive, very detailed, in-depth. That means completely you are getting the whole picture of that particular section or population. So that requires, that intensive study requires small sample. You are able to put your time, effort, everything that is possible when the sample size is small, that is for intensive study purposes. Next point that you have to keep in mind is type of sampling. Small random sampling is often too much superior to a larger, badly selected sample. So sampling error, type of sampling is also what kind of sampling, whether it's going to be simple random sampling technique, or whether you are going to be, hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
Am I visible?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. You are visible, audible, very
Okay,
clear,
very
sir.
good. But it seems, I lost, who is present that I lost it. Anyway, but I could see only this one. Anyway, my dear friends, yes, type of sampling, what kind of sample you are going to use? Is it a simple random sampling technique? Whatever that we discussed in the last class. We talked about or discussed the simple random, systematic random sampling technique, stratified random sampling technique, cluster random sampling technique, and the non-probability sampling techniques also. So out of all these, what kind of sampling technique you are going to use for collecting the data? That you should also decide. For this particular population, this is the appropriate statistical technique that I can use for collecting the data that you have to decide as a researcher. The next point that you have to keep in mind is standard of accuracy and acceptable confidence levels. The sample size has to be increased fourfold for doubling accuracy. This is the point that I would like to drive, my dear friends. If you want to get the accurate results, then your sample has to be increased fourfold for doubling accuracy. It is to be accurate means you have to collect the data from larger population or larger from a big, the number of participants should be very high. From them, you have to more number of participants. From more number of participants, you have to collect the data for getting accurate information. The next one is availability of finance. If you are rich man, I think you're all rich to my knowledge. Those who are pursuing this MSc Psychology from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, most of them are employees and they are very rich. And for them, there is no difficulty at all to spend so much of money from their pocket to get valid data from the people. Am I right, sir? You're all rich, I know.
Right, sir. Right, sir.
You're all rich people. You can also spend money from your pocket. You can also use some assistants there who can also help you for collecting the data. You can also train them before they go for the collection of the data. Then ensure if the data is wrong, again you will also repeat. Not repeating the wrong data, but you can go another time for collecting the data, right data, which also requires your pockets to be full of money. So if availability of finance from the researcher is sound, then size of the sample depends on the amount of money that you are going to spend. Suppose if the data that you collected is not able to satisfy the conditions, then you may also go second time for collecting the data for additional population or additional participants. So by that way, I think you need money also. If the data is to be collected here 4 times or 5 times, if the results are not good, then automatically you require to have the finance. So that is also one of the points that one has to consider. Then also availability, other considerations. Trained investigators, you can also employ trained investigators. You should also pay money for them. They cannot do your work free. They should also be paid because they have to spend their time for this purpose. So you have to train them before sending them to the field for collection of the data. Then it should also, the tools should also be equally good. If the sampling error, in order to reduce or narrowing the sampling error, your tools should also be accurate. Your questionnaire, your interview schedules, your scales, whatever you develop for the collection of the data, they are supposed to have the validity and the reliability. If they are good or standard tools, then it will be well and good for getting the sample error-free data. Then the conditions under the sample is the time factor should also be considered. The time factor. If the project term is about, the duration of the project is about 1 year or 2 years, you should also consider that particular time that you can also complete your research project and then submit your report. So this is also one of the factors. The time factor should also be considered while deciding the sample size. While deciding the sample size. So these are the various points that one has to consider while selecting or deciding the sample size or determining the sample size. Nature of the universe, whether it is heterogeneous or homogeneous, then you should also nature of the classes proposed, how many classes of the segments of the population that you are considering for your study, the nature of study, whether intensive or otherwise, it's not that much intensive. Then type of sampling should also be considered. Then if you want to get the accurate results, your sampling should be fourfold. Then if you have money, then you can also, if the sample size is not enough, you can also go for next time for collecting the data. That way you can also collect the number that is required for you. Then also other conditions, you can also use the investigators, and before they put in the field, then they should be trained, and your tools should also be developed, and then those people should also be trained how to use the tools. Then the time factors should also be considered. These are some of the factors that we have to keep in mind or bear in mind whenever you talk about sampling size. The general rule is if the random size of the sample increases, the amount of sampling error decreases. That you have to keep in mind. Am I right, my dear friends?
Yes, sir.
The general rule is if the random size of the sample increases, then the amount of sampling error decreases. The higher the sample, the lesser the error. That is the thumb rule. If the error is too much, you cannot infer the results. You cannot interpret the results. So that's the reason why you have to be very careful while deciding the sample size. Then population variability and sampling error. Just now we have also mentioned that, we discussed that. Because population is heterogeneous one. It's not homogeneous one. Isn't it? Especially in our country or in areas, then you find different factors. They are not one and the same. They are heterogeneous. They are different in many matters. So when population variability and sampling error, when it varies, when the population varies, how should be the sampling error? As the size of the random sampling increases, the amount of sampling error of means decreases. Mean will also decrease. The amount of sampling error of means will decrease. As the variability in the population increases, the amount of sampling error increases because you collect the data from one part too much and less in other part. It's not proportionate sampling. If the proportionate sampling lacks, then there would also be sampling error. So population means in one area, the population would be very high. The density of the population would also be very high. Then how to consider that one? That kind of variation. Population is not the same in all the areas. In one village, it is 1,000. In another village, it is about 3,000. The size of the villages also differ. Similarly, the population will also differ. If that population differs from one place to another place, automatically the sampling error will also occur. As the variability increases in the population, similarly, the sampling error will also vary on the basis of the population variability. It varies. So characteristics on the basis of all these things, then what should be the characteristics of a good sample design? Sample design must result in a truly representative sample. Truly representative sample. Your sample should represent the population. Then that will be good sample design. Next one is sample design must be such results in a small sampling error. So if the sampling design is good, then sampling error would be very small. That can be considered. Small sample will be error can be considered. small sampling error can be considered. But if it is too much, if the error is too much, then the data, then you have to almost, the data is not usable for your research. That is another characteristic. Small error, it's okay, that can be considered, but it should not be too much. Sample design must be viable in the context of funds available for the research study. If the project is gifted to you for about 4 or 5 lakhs, if it is funded, if the government funds that particular project for about 5 lakhs, consider that 5 lakhs should be used sufficient for completing your study. So that way you have to think how much amount that I have to spend for collection of data and how much amount that I have to spend for typing, how much amount that I have to use it for analysis purposes. Like that you have to calculate. So whatever the amount that is given by the government for this particular project, if you get such kind of project from the government, which is financed, keeping that in view, how much amount has to be spent by you for the data collection. That should also be within the reach of the researcher. Sample design must be viable in the context of funds available for the research study. Sample design must be such so that systematic bias can be controlled in a better way. It must be such that sample design must be such so that systematic bias can be controlled in a better way. Ensure that there should not be any bias in the sampling design. I should only consider this segment. If you leave the other segment, or if there is any favoritism, or if you are not able to reach the other areas, and you are collecting more population from one segment or more samples from one segment, that means there is variation with regard to the samples that you are collecting. So that should not be there. So that's bias kind of sampling design should be avoided to the extent possible. Then only that becomes a good sample design. That good sample design should have these characteristics. One must it be representative and it be a small error one, and the funds should also be within the funds. You have to complete your study. Then also the bias should not be, that should be controlled. The bias should be controlled. Then that becomes a good sample, isn't it? So these are the characteristics of good sampling design. So if you take up any study, you should consider especially the studies that you are going to take up in the field with the human beings. You have to ensure all these characteristics, making your sample design a good one. Then this is all about your sample size and sampling errors. So far, I think most of the time that you have spent discussing the various techniques, statistical techniques, then the sample, what kind of sample, then how to reduce the sample errors, then what kind of strategies that we can adopt for making our sample error-free one sample. So therefore, while deciding the sample size, you have to keep in mind all those points which we discussed. With that, we have completed the unit number 16, sample size and sampling error. Well, friends, these are the very important issues that a researcher has to consider when the data has to be completed from the participants. Then the appropriate kind of statistical technique that you have to use, sampling technique that you have to consider. Then also ensure that there should not be too much variation with regard to the sample. And if the biased kind of sample should be controlled, that should not be acceptable. Then ensure that the data is collected properly from the participants. Then after deciding the sample size, the next step is how to collect the data. How to collect the data. Now you are sure that this is the sample. You have decided the sample. This is my sample, and I have to collect the data from this sample or from these participants. We can call them as participants. These are my participants who are included for my studies that you have decided. Then from those participants, how to collect the data. Then for that purpose, we are going to discuss the methods of data collection, that is unit number 17. Unit number 17. Hello, friends? Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Have you seen some of the, in our unit number 16, have you seen some of the graphs here? Are you able to see the graphs? Graphs in the sense, I think you can find some dots. Page number 158, page number 159. Some dots.
Yes, sir.
If you link up all these dots, you can get some shape. What is that shape?
Triangle shape.
Distribution.
Triangle shape.
I mean, the kind of a distribution.
I mentioned in the beginning itself.
Bell shape karo.
Yeah,
Bulk up.
exactly. If it is a normal probability, that means if the data is normal, then you get the bell-shaped curve, which we can call it as normal probability curve. Normal probability curve. So if you can add up all these dots from bottom to the top and then come down towards x-axis to your right, that curve would appear as bell. Okay? Hello, madams. Sirs.
Yes, sir.
Madams and sirs.
Yes, sir.
The very
Yes,
example
sir.
that we can quote, if the data, what the data that you collect, if you draw this graph for that data should reflect the bell shape curve.
Yes, sir.
That is normal probability curve. Then only you have to go ahead with the analysis part. If you get such kind of graph, that means whatever the data that you collected on the base of this, if you get this kind of picture or the shape, then automatically your data that you collected is able to follow the normality. Able to follow the normality, then only you are going ahead with the use of statistical techniques for the analysis purposes. So therefore, I think if you can see all these graphs, in the middle you can find the mean. So the mean, median, mode should be in the same place. If it is 60 is the mean, similarly, the median value would also be 60, mode value would also be 60, isn't it? And example, you can also see this. The mean in 150, page number 158, you can find descriptive statistics. If the n is 9 and if the n is 36 samples, then for that purpose, the mean for 9 samples is 60.095. Are you able to see this?
Yes, yes, yes.
And for 36 samples also from 200 population,
Yeah.
you find the mean is 59.990.
Yes, sir.
That means the difference is very less.
Minute.
It indicates your data is following normality. Okay?
Yeah.
If you get this kind of result out of your data, if you conduct a study, then that means the data that you collected is able to follow normality, then you can use a statistical techniques for analysis purposes. Similarly, you can also see the standard deviation. But when the sample is 9, n is 9, then you can find 0.983 is the standard deviation.
Yes, sir.
When the n is 36, you find the standard deviation is 0.508. The difference is about only 0.4. All right?
Yeah.
Which is negligible. Especially this particular calculations will tell you that If you get these kind of values, then you are going to get this bell-shaped curve. If you draw the diagram or the graph, then that would be in the bell-shaped curve. Then, of course, that is a good data. And then the other things of using the other statistical techniques for analysis purposes will come later. Okay, na? Ensure that the data will follow this kind of curve. Am I right, my dear friends?
Yes.
That's very nice. Now, the sample is decided by us. It should not be too much, nor it should be less. That you have to consider. The higher the sample, the lesser the error also. Anyway, it should not too much higher, nor it should so much shorter, isn't it? It should kind of average size, okay? That kind of sample you have to collect, which should also be representative one. Then after fixing the sample size, now the picture is very clear. You know the population, and you have decided the sample size. Then you have to go to the field for collecting the data. Then let us try to understand how to collect the data from the participants. That is given in unit number 17. Okay, na?
Yep.
Then this PPT is okay, visible, no problem at all, the PPT.
No, sir, we can view it.
Very nice, very nice, very nice. But one thing is I'm not able to see your faces. Anyway, well, friends, these methods of data collection. There are different types of tools of data collection. If we want to collect the data, you require tool. Tool doesn't mean here in this particular process, especially psychological researchers, it's not, what shall we say, the Suti, the Kodavali, the X, the bar, all those things are not required for us. There are also tools. They are not the tools we are going to use. We are going to use those tools. They are observation is a tool, interview is a tool, questionnaire is a tool, rating scale is a tool. Normally we use all these kinds of tools for collecting the data in our research, especially psychological research. Consider all these tools, especially observation, play a vital role, observing the behavior, observing how the population or sample participants are behaving, how are their activities and acts, reactions. For that purpose, all this observation will find a place for data collection purposes. So observation is one of the tools, interview is another tool, questionnaire is another tool, rating is still another tool. These are the tools that we are going to use for collecting the data from the participants. Those participants are our sample. That is our clients. They are the clients for our study. You are the doctor, you are the researcher, and the participants are the clients, are the samples also. Now, what is this observation? Refers to watching and listening to the behavior of others over time without manipulating and controlling it, and record things in ways that allow some degree of analytical interpretation and discussion. There are two types of sampling behavior. Okay. Observation is watching and listening to the behavior of others over a period of time, without manipulating. What you observe as it is, whatever your observations are as it is, without change. So that kind of watching the behavior of the participants over a period of time, how they are behaving, how they are acting, how they are responding, how they are interacting, and how they are reacting to certain elements. That has to be observed by the researcher. And for that purpose, observation play a vital role. So I think most of the things, if you want to understand the behavior of that particular man, the person, then I think this is one of the tools that you can use, for data collection, how he or she is behaving in a particular time or over a period of time. Then this can be two types of sampling here. One is event sampling, the other one is time sampling. So event sampling means this is the selection for observation of integral behavior, occurrences or events of a given class. So events, you are trying to study the events of the participants in which they are participating. If there is a class, you find so many events, how the teacher is interacting with the children, how the children are responding to the teacher, how are they behaving, are they disturbing, are they able to follow it, or they are not following. Huh? Somebody is laughing?
Laughing, sir.
These are the various events in a class that will occur. Events are tantrums, fights, people will fight in the classroom itself, they will also quarrel, they play games and verbal interchanges, classroom interaction between the teacher and the pupils. These are the various events that will occur in the classroom. Then you can observe all these things, how they are behaving, how their behavior is in the classroom. I think these are some of the events that will take place in a class. Then of course they have listed out certain events. So during these events, how are they behaving? That has to be observed and recorded without any manipulation. Then the next one is time sampling. Selection of behavioral units for observation at different points of time. So if you observe today's class, then after 15 days, we can observe the same class. How should it be? Is it the same behavior that is replicated even after 15 days? Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
No change at all in the behavior, in the fights, in the quarrels, in the verbal exchanges and other things. If there is no change at all, still that is continuing, then there is a need to interference, need to take some action against those kind of behaviors who are able to disturb the class also. Isn't it? Over a period of different time spans, different times, if you can observe the same behavior, which is not, of course, controlled, then I think there is a need to interfere in the matters that some kind of action should be taken by the teacher or by the school authorities, not to have the fights, the quarrels, and then other things, tantrums in the classroom itself, which are not acceptable in the classroom. So that kind of two kinds of samplings with regard to observation need to be done. Then types of observations, those are the samples. Now let us try to understand what are the various types of observations. One is participant observation, the other is non-participant observation. If the researcher himself or herself is participating in the classroom activities along with the students, he is a participant, one among them. It is unstructured. The identity of the observer is not known. Students should not know that you are observing. If they know that you are observing me, then they try to hide their behavior. The real behavior or the true behavior will not come. So what is the true behavior of the students means? They should not know that you are observing them. This is called disguised participant observation. This is called disguised participant observation. The strength of this particular observation is the behavior can be recorded realistically. That's what I'm telling, my dear friends. If they do not know that you are observing, then you are getting or recording the true behavior, the real behavior of the students in the classroom. If they know that you are observing them, they try to control, they manage, they try to be silent, like a gentleman. The original behavior will not come out. So therefore, you are not supposed to tell them that you are therefore observing their behavior. Then you should also portray like one among them. Then I think you are going to get the real behavior of the students. The limitation is it fails to precise about the procedures for data collection as the observation is unstructured. Since the observation is not structured, this should be done this time. These are the certain rules. So those things are not following here. So therefore, when it is like that, it's not, systematically or that kind of thing is not there. If it is unsystematic kind of observing the situation, that it fails to precise about the procedures for data collection and the observation is unstructured. Maybe recording it and then presenting it properly, that may be difficult for the researcher because that is unsystematic. At times he may not record also if he is participating in the activities. He may also forget, isn't it? So such kind of things will also happen. So therefore, one of the limitations of this observation is fails to summarize the whole behavior of the students, because he is one among them and he will also forget some of the things, and it may not be structured one. It may not be. It is not structured one. That's the reason why the limitation is you are not able to precise it properly. Then the human weakness like sympathy, love, hatred may interfere towards members. If there is a clause, if there is a very good boy with a good face, you totally love that boy or love that girl, isn't it? You forget that you are a participant. That means love, sympathy, affection, all these things, biased kind of observation should not happen there. That will also happen in some cases. After all, we have weaknesses as human beings, isn't it? Hello, sirs.
Yes, sir.
So we have our own
Yes, sir.
weaknesses. That weakness should not become a factor for getting invalid results. ఓకేనా? చెప్పండి, మాట్లాడండి. మీరు మాట్లాడకపోతే నేను ముందుకు వెళ్ళలేను.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
చూడండి, నాకుండే బిహేవియర్ అదే. మీరు మాట్లాడుతున్నారు లేదు ప్రతి డౌట్.
లేదు సార్, లేదు వింటున్నాం.
ఇలాంటి రీసెర్చర్ ఉంటే, నాలాంటి వాడు రీసెర్చర్ ఉంటే ఇట్లాంటివి వస్తాయి. బికాస్ ఐఎమ్ సో మచ్ కన్సర్న్ విత్ యూ వెదర్ యు ఆర్ దేర్ ఆర్ నాట్. సో అటువంటి కన్సర్న్ ఉండకూడదమ్మా ఇక్కడ. వీడు నా వాడు, వీడు మంచివాడు, వీడు ముద్దుగా ఉన్నాడు, వీటితో ఆటలాడుకుందామంటే కుదరదు ఇక్కడ.
లేదు సార్, అలాగే మా అదృష్టం.
To observe the behavior, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Participant observation is not here, sir, right?
Okay, good. Next one is non-participant observation.
This is more of our
observation. Next one is non-participant observation. The investigator, there is spelling mistake in that. Non-participant observation. Here the observer is not participating. Outside the frame of the classroom, sitting pretty well, hiding himself somewhere. So if you are observing their behavior, hiding yourself somewhere, hiding the behavior somewhere, there is some difficulty also here. I lost this PPT. Yeah, right, friends. Non-participant observation. Here the researcher is hiding himself or herself quite away from that situation where all this kind of jugglery is taking place. Then observing that activities, we use this non-participant observation.
I see.
It can be mostly a recorded one, or the sample would be taken from the randomization. Is it so, sir?
Here the question of observing the whole class. whoever is there in the class, you are observing everybody there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Based on their
Yes.
behavior, you are recording it. For the time being, you just put aside that randomization sampling. But in the classroom, if there are 30 candidates, you are observing the 30 candidates. You are not observing a single candidate. That can also be taken, no problem at all. Suppose if the school authorities wanted, if one person or the one boy is doing the undesirable activities in the classroom, if you ask the researcher, he can concentrate on that boy alone or only, not on others. Isn't it?
Okay.
So here, if he is observing, if there's a class of 30 members, he may be observing all the 30 candidates. Or if you want to have those candidates, selected candidates whose behavior is not desirable, which is reported by the school authorities. This boy were not able to control. This girl were not able to control. As a researcher, is it possible to help us to study the behavior and give us the report how to go about this particular behavior candidate? If they ask, then you may take up those candidates. But here he has considered only the classroom where 30 members or 25 students are there, and their behavior you are observing. And again, I'm telling you, it's not that much easy task to observe the behavior of all the 25 candidates. That is also limitation.
Yes, sir.
Because he doesn't have 25 eyes, am I right?
Yeah.
If there are 25 eyes, each eye will also catch one person and it will concentrate focus on that individual. All these 25 candidates are behaving differently, then it would be chaos or confusion for the researcher also.
Exactly.
Anyway, he's talking about the classroom and he's observing those students in that classroom as a participant, as non-participant. But nowadays, you have this, what's this, CCTVs. We can also observe the classrooms by sitting somewhere, watching the TVs also, because that kind of facility, when the cameras are raised in the classroom and attached in somewhere office, we can also observe their behavior by watching them in the television, so the CCTVs. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That you can use it. Such
But
kind
sir,
of
one question.
Ah.
If the participant is aware, like for example, if it is available, the CCTV camera capture, the student may know that and the behavior may change for an observation, isn't it?
Yes, certainly there is a possibility if he knows that his behavior is observed, maybe through CCTVs or maybe by somebody, he controls his behavior at times.
Exactly. That's what my point was.
Yeah, it happens. If you observe, if I think that you are observing my behavior, what I do is I keep myself silent. I keep my emotions silent.
Yes.
Isn't it? Madam, am I right or wrong?
Yes, sir.
If I think that you are observing or studying my behavior, she has come here to observe my behavior, to study my behavior. If I
So
know,
it will be
then
more
I
of a controlled behavior.
yeah, then what I do is I try to behave like a gentleman, very polite, very respectable. Isn't it?
Not controlled, assumed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? That is non-personal observation.
That's right.
And it is representative, the strength of this is representative. Plan the program systematically. Non-personal observation is systematic kind of observation, and it is also representative. Weaknesses. Setting may not remain the natural one. Yes. Setting may not be the natural one. Because when you are talking about CCTVs, other things, that kind of thing is not a natural one. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So that is one of the weaknesses of this particular non-participant observation. Yes.
Can go for the next one, sir.
Then try to go next one. What is this not?
Yes, sir.
Something wrong with this also.
Sir,
What?
Go for next one, sir.
Next one is, because there is no movement for this PPT now,
It's not able to.
not able to move this.
That's it.
Cursor movement is not there, sir.
Cursor is there, even with the cursor or even the fingertip also not able to move that because not move towards the other one. Some problems. I face some of the other problem with this technology. Anyway, try to understand the other things. What are the other kinds of methods of data collection? We have completed this participant observation, which is participant observation, non-participant observation. We have also seen the limitations of the sense as one of the methods that we can employ for collecting the data for studying the behavior of the participants. Next one is interview. Well, friends, anyway, there is some kind of difficulty with this. I'm not able to move it further, the PPT.
Before slide. Is it possible? Go with before slide.
It's not going. It's going neither back nor forward. There is some problem with this. Anybody is controlling this? And it's all right, my dear friends. Next, let us go to the next one, interview. This is also very important one. I think you are going to get a question on this also because interview nowadays has a very important role to play with regard to the studies. The next method that we can use for collecting the data is interview. The interview is probably man's oldest and most often used device for obtaining information. Data means information.
Yeah.
Data, don't think that is only the numbers. It's the information that you are getting. How to enlarge this one? PPT is going to enlarge. What is the option that I can use for enlarging this?
To the right side, you have the middle button, no, sir. There you can click.
Middle button?
Yeah, next to the cross button.
Yes. But the problem is, shall I use F4? No. Okay, right, my dear friends. Anyway, right. Yeah, this is the oldest method for obtaining information from the people. It's a social process. Interview is a social process involving at least two persons, the interviewer and the respondent. Two persons would be there minimum. One would be the interviewer and the respondent. Interviewer and the respondent. So interviewer is one who will interview the candidate. The fellow who is being interviewed is known as interviewee.
Yes, sir.
So the interaction between the interviewer and the interviewee is what is required for us. So whatever that I want to get the character, I am supposed to be the interviewer. Then I have to interview the candidate to elicit the information from him, who is also interviewee, who is interacting or responding to our questions. The person who is responding to our questions or answering those questions which are posed by the interviewer is an interviewee. So this is the interaction between the interviewer and the interviewee. And this is of two types. One is structured interview. The other one is unstructured interview. Unstructured interview may be defined as one in which already prepared questions are prepared questions. I think most of the interviews in the TVs might have seen. You might have seen the TVs or watched in the TVs. One-to-one interview means there would be a set of questions which are already prepared by the interviewer. And for those questions, the interviewer has to answer. So here, the structured interview is that in which already prepared questions are asked in a set order by the interviewer and answers are to be recorded in a standardized form. Standardized form. So it's not that vaguely recorded. Each and every point and every word and every letter which is received from the interviewee has to be recorded. That's the evidence for us how the behavior of the candidate is. You are not supposed to miss out even a single letter which is uttered by an interviewee. So there is a recording format for recording purpose, how that, whatever the replies that you are getting, that you have to record them in a certain format. So I think this is completely a structured kind of interview, a set of questions which are sequentially or in order, set in order. And for each question, there should be response from the interviewee. Then the other one is unstructured interview. And it may not be a structured interview that of the other one which is just discussed. But this is a deeper one. At times you may not get answers also. Despite the efforts made by you to get, here probing, the questions are not set. Predetermined questions are not there. Not prepared, that kind of questions. Which question has to be asked? That too, in some order. That can be seen only in structured interview. But this is something different, quite opposite to that of structured interview, which we can call it as unstructured interview. Related to that particular topic, we try to put so many questions to elicit answer or to understand his or her behavior to that. We use different questions, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
From different angles, we try to attack. During this time, at times, the interviewer, he will also run away from your interview. He will run away from the interview because you are investigating altogether like a policeman, going on putting questions and questions for which there is no answer. He is not interested. Then automatically what will happen means he will run away from that interview also. From that, what you have to do is the environment should be congenial. It should be very friendly interview. If you want to dig deeper, even then that should also be a friendly kind of atmosphere should exist or prevail there. But he is not a person on which you have the control. You are not able to control. You are here, you are not here to control that interview, but you are trying your level best to get the behavior. If there is any inner behavior that has to come out, isn't it? At times they will not come out with that behavior.
We talk show can be a good example, sir.
Why should I talk about my personal issues? Why should I talk about personal issues? I cannot reveal, isn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm so many connections to so many people. Shall I do it?
No.
You can't answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think there are certain things which is not interested. You may not reveal it also. In order to reveal those things, I think from different angles, there would be some kind of interaction from the interviewer to get some response from them. I think it's unstructured. Any question related to the particular theme or the topic for discuss for the interview purpose, there may be variety of questions. At times it may be, what should we say, closed end or open end, or otherwise some kind of, briefing kind of thing, or explaining, all those things would be there, but it will also be difficult task to record all those things also. Because from different angles, probing, and the base of the reaction of the participant, you may be changing the questions also, isn't it? How to elicit the information from those people. I think you might have seen such kind of interactions between the police wallahs and those persons who involved in the drug scam. Am I right? There was a big scam, earlier in Hyderabad. And those persons were asked so many questions. Is there any connection with that? So here also, I think in order to get such kind of inner behavior from the participants, the questions should also differ, and the way of asking the questions should also differ. It should be very friendly also. Then only you will reveal all those things. Or otherwise, it should also be like that of a doctor with the patient. Doctor is the interviewer and the patient is the interviewee. In order to understand the problem, in order to understand the problem, such kind of interaction will also take place between the doctor and the patient. That is one of the interview kind of thing only. Next, advantage and disadvantage of the interview is that interview allows greater flexibility in the process of questioning. Flexibility in the process. If the question is not able to answer, then we try to change it. Isn't it? It's a lead question at times. If he's not able to answer, the question will also lead with the answer. How is the color? Is it bright or is it white? It's a red. How is the color? Is it bright? Because the question is there, the answer is also there. Is it white or is it red or is it blue? How is the color of the wall? How is the color of the wall? Is it white? Is it blue? Is it red? You can call them as leading questions. You are able to give them some kind of clue also. So I think you have the flexibility to change the pattern of the questions also. Such kind of advantage can also be seen. At the same time, disadvantage will also be there with the questions. Interview facilitates the investigator in obtaining the desired information readily and quickly. This is one of the advantages. It facilitates the investigator in being my friends. Then the validity of the verbal information given by the interviewees can easily be checked on the basis of their non-verbal cues. Interviewees, a desired level of control can be exercised over the situation or context within which questions are asked and answers are given. Within the context only, the questions would be there. Still, the interview is not without limitations or problems. Although there are advantages, you will get quick response, and it can also be checked, and you can also have some control, and you can have some flexibility with regard to the questions. And all these advantages, besides this, you have the disadvantages of this interview. If you want to use this tool as a tool for collecting the data, there would also be certain disadvantages. Based on the study, you have to decide what kind of tool that you have to use for collecting the data. Then the disadvantage of the interview is, number one, interviewer's variability. Interviewer's variability. It is commonly found that at times, the interviewer views similar response differently and recalls them differently from interview to interview. This man is not stable. No consistency with regard to the interviewer. From one interview to another interview, he may not record those things properly, or he may record differently. That is one of the disadvantages. He may not record all those interaction at times. He is not a good interviewer. If he doesn't have such kind of memory power, That's the reason why what we say is we can have the tape recorder beside that. If you miss out anything, I think you can also switch on the tape recorder and listen to it. Such kind of arrangements should also be done by the interviewer. If anything that is forgotten, if the tape recorder is available, if you can record the process, then the truth of that particular interaction will also come out because everything is recorded in the tape. That can be played, and then the information can be summarized. That's one of the disadvantages, the interviewer's variability. You will be changing from interview to interview. His face, his ways of behavior, his behavior itself can be changed. Inter-interviewer variability, when several interviews are used in a study and the nature of interview is unstructured, too many cooks spoil the bath. అంతేనండి?
Yes, sir.
అందరిని ఉపయోగిస్తే అసలు ముందు తయారు చేసేటటువంటి ఆ బాత్ మొత్తం చెడిపోతాయి. ఎవరు పడితే చేస్తే అందరూ ఇంటర్వ్యూ చేస్తామంటే. Certain rules and regulations for the interviewer. So too many cooks spoil bath కాబట్టి there is a scope for inter-interviewer variability. When too many interviewers are involved in the process of interviewing the candidates or the participants, that is one of the disadvantages. Then you are creating some kind of chaos, complexity, and also fear among the participants. Why all these people are coming and then putting questions and disturbing me? If he knows, we are observes, all this is a kind of disturbance to the interviewee, then he will not support, he will not cooperate. Then all your interview, which is structured, which is arranged, that will be spoiled. Then the time factors should also be a factor. Within the time, if there is no proper reaction for the questions, I think it will be very difficult within the time to get the information. The time factor would also be one of the disadvantages. Variations inherent in the interviewing context. Interview context itself has some variations. If there is a pleasant place, which is very, very happiest one, then there may be the difference or the variation in the responses can also be seen. Recording information. So while recording the information, and there should also be some kind of variations. So all those interviewed information cannot be recorded properly. And interpretation of that particular thing at times may not be the right one. Erroneous kind of interpretations will also come out. So that is not desirable. So such kind of disadvantages can also be seen with the kind of the interviews. So if the interviewer is not good, and you are not able to get the information from the interviewee. So interviewers should be a person who is very friendly, who is knowledgeable, who is expert, who is systematic, who is very serious with regard to the theme, and then who should be in a position to get the information. Such a kind of person should only interview the candidates to elicit such kind of responses. The important sources of errors, where the errors will occur when we talk about interview. So source of errors in interview are attitude of the viewer. Just now I have spoken. He is not kind, he is not empathetic, he is not expert, he is not sincere, he is not pleasant. If there is any quarrel between himself and his wife in the house, that will also reflect at the time of interview also. I think that kind of attitude should not be there with the interviewer. Next, incomprehensibility of the questions asked. The questions may not be comprehensible, not able to understood by the participant. So your questions should be very simple, meaningful, able to be understood by the participants. Lack of warmth in the situation of the interview, warmth, pleasing, appealing. It's appealing. He's okay. He's a very good person that I can answer him. So such kind of pleasing nature should be there with the interviewer. Lack of motivation, respondents. Then you have to put them to the level where that he can answer. If there is no motivation, then you can have some kind of chat before conducting the interview, make friendship, move very close, talk about him, talk about his situation, what is he doing, whereabouts, what abouts. If you sort that kind of situation before actual interview, I think there will be some kind of understanding between the interviewer and the interviewee is possible. Such that time you cannot conduct the interview. Then the level that you will come up for answering, that kind of situation should be sorted. And then which we can call it as he should be motivated to reply to your answers. The duration of interview is also one of the factors, source of errors. If the less duration means then if you want to get more information, it may not be possible also, and all the questions may not be asked at times. So therefore, duration of the interview is also one of the sources for errors in the interview. Lack of motivation from the respondent is one of the errors. Lack of warmth in the situation, incomprehension of the questions, attitude of the interviewer. These are the various sources which will result in the error of the interviews. Then what shall we do in order to overcome all these errors? Then there should be honesty from the point of the interviewer. Your responses will not be revealed. If they are talking about the sensitive issues, and sensible, and he should promise he should not reveal or disclose all those issues with anybody. So therefore, he should be very honest, very accurate, adaptability to the situation, capacity to adjust to that situation should also be there on the part of the interviewer. Then there should also be interest. It's not only interest among the interviewers, there should also be interest that should be generated among the interviewees. Then only they will respond. Then temperament, tantrums, isn't it? Temperament of the interview is like a influence the output of the interview. So therefore, temperament of the is a good, is a cool, is a hot, isn't it? Very serious, very angry, all those things would not work. So therefore, you should be very sincere, very friendly, very close, very pleasing, then very cool. If he feels that he is very close to him, then it is possible to get such a kind of information from the participants. Then what is the time now for us?
4:36, sir.
4:36.
36.
My time is about only 4:30, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
My time is only 4:30, up to 4:30 only, na?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It seems I have crossed my time. Right, my dear friends, I think with this we have completed some of the techniques which can be used for data collection. And tomorrow we can discuss some more tools which will be used for data collection, their questionnaires, and the focus group technique. We can also discuss these two tools in the next class, that is tomorrow.
Okay, sir. Sir,
Sorry,
can you
my
share
dear
the
friends.
PPT?
Huh?
Is it possible to share the PPT, sir?
Yeah, why not? I can share it, no problem at all. To whom I have to share this?
You can share it in the chat. We can save it.
Chat box, sir.
Chat box?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Or otherwise, you can also you can send your number to me. That's I pass it to you. Then you can also share that with your friends. Shall I give my number?
Yes, sir.
98. Sorry, I think I want your number. Can you give a number for sharing that PPTs? I think shall I put this in the email?
Oh, that
Yeah,
would
you,
be
Some
good.
one person.
you can send in as a chat box, sir.
You go to the chat box and see the icon as a file, sir, towards the left corner, down. There are emoji, attachments, and file is there.
Sir, please also share the PPT with us. Abbo, మీ అంతా చాటింగ్ చేస్తున్నారు ఇక్కడ. You people are chatting, okay?
మీకే పెట్టాం సార్
We
అది.
are, we are requesting you.
నాకు పెట్టారా?
It was for you.
Oh, okay, okay. It's very nice. And so I think how should I share that PPT?
కింద బాటమ్ లో వెళ్తే మీకు థర్డ్ ఐకాన్ ఫైల్ అని కనిపిస్తుంది సార్.
File is there.
క్లిక్ చేయండి సార్ దానిపైన.
చేశాను, ఏదో డిస్ప్లే అయింది.
అందులో నుంచి మీకు షేర్ చేయవలసిన ఫైల్ సెలెక్ట్ చేసుకుంటే and then enter it. It will be coming on the chat.
Okay, 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 okay. Or I will share it as something with his name. Somebody has given his name. Shem. Yeah. Okay, Nani, I can do it later, okay? Na?
Sure, sir.
And for today's class, this much, and then we can discuss the other things tomorrow, okay?
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. I'm sorry
Okay,
I'm not
thank you
able
so
to
much, sir.
have this in the screen.
No
Not
worries,
able
sir.
to see
Tomorrow
the
you can do it.
Yeah, there is some problem with this, no? Caught up with something. That's all about for this class. See you tomorrow, my dear friends, at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
How many candidates have attended today's class?
16 members.
18.
No. There were 16, right?
Right now, only we have 12 participants.
Yeah. People might have.
Present.
Yeah. That's all right for this class, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much, sir.
I'll learn other things also, whatever this, if you want this to be shared tomorrow, I can share it, okay? Na?
Sure, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.